Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the pixellab.net. Jordan Condell here. I have a longer tutorial for you today. This one is going to be kind of a step-by-step, just a walkthrough of this video and how I created it. So as you can see, it's kind of a Dynamics 101 overview. We'll show you guys how to use Dynamics, how to make this thing explode, and then also how to make it slow down to a stop and then have the camera rotate around it, sort of like the Matrix effect. So that's pretty cool. And then the second half of the tutorial will be this color, how to add random color to your clones using the Mo shader and the random effector and all that kind of stuff. A little bit tricky to set up, but once you get it, it's really cool. So let's dive right in. So we'll add a cube. I believe it was a bit smaller when I made it, so make it 100 on all fronts. Then we can go ahead and put that in a MoGraph cloner. If you hit your Alt or Option button while you're clicking this, it'll dump your cube right into the cloner. So we're going to want to change that to a grid array. And the default grid is 3x3x3, which I used, but I did want to make a little bit of space in between all of these. So these yellow dots, if you click and drag them, it'll change how far these are spaced away from each other. So we'll just drag them all a little bit away so that we got just a little bit of space in between all these cubes. There we go. And then one other thing I did was I added a fillet to these cubes so that the beveled edge would pick up some of the reflections and just be a little more glossy. Let's see, we'll go into the cube, check on fillet, and that is not what we want. We want the fillet radius to be way down. Go to something like that, just a little bit to pick up some of those reflections. And then when you're working with Dynamics, you got to be very careful with your subdivisions, so we'll want to keep those very low, maybe 2. Looks pretty good. So I have a blue texture already made. I'm just going to throw that on here. And there you go. We're ready to add some dynamics and get this thing to explode. Alright, so the way to add dynamics is very simple. You can either go up to Simulation, Dynamics, and then add the rigid body tag, or you can right click on the cloner, go to Dynamics Tags, and click Dynamics Body. So if we hit play now, you'll notice that the cube is falling, but it falls right through the floor. That's because we have not specified that the floor is an object that we want to collide with the cubes. So on the floor, we'll right click, go to Dynamics Tags, and hit Dynamics Body. Now if we hit play, there we go. Now we're talking. So that's kind of the default dynamics right there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to want to speed it up when it's falling, and then when it hits the ground, we're going to want it to slow down. That's actually not in any of these tags. You can look around in here and there's no way to do that. You have to go to a hidden page in order to find out how to do this, which is kind of strange. You think it'd be right in one of these tags, but it's not. So if you go to Edit and then go to Project Settings, there's a bunch of different things that you can change for your project. The one to the right, the tab to the right, is Dynamics. And this time scale is really the gold. This is what we're looking for. So by default, it's at 100%, and this is basically just how fast the dynamics take place. So if we change this to 300% and then play our animation, you can see it all happens very fast. Same thing when we go to 50%, that's half speed. So when it happens, it goes really slow. So, oh, and actually, I got a tip for you right here. If you notice, when this thing hits, if you look at these cubes, they're supposed to be kind of random, you know, as they explode. But as you can see, they're all kind of tilted the same way. If you want to add more randomness to your dynamics, it's actually in the tag. If you go to Collision Noise, this is set to 0.5 by default, which is hardly anything. If you want more randomness, you can kick this way up, so maybe 10 or so. And then when they collide, they're going to be much more random. So there's a lot more differentiation between the different cubes. So that's kind of a cool tip. All right, let's go back to our project settings and then dynamics. Let's go ahead and set this guy to 300 so that they fall faster in the beginning. And then right when they hit, it'll be maybe 15 frames or so. We're going to keyframe it down to 50%. So we'll keyframe this guy by hitting Control and clicking on the timescale. then we'll go ahead and move to maybe 15, and we'll hit 50% and control click on there again. Now we'll see what that looks like. Alright, a little bit too crazy. So right about here we need them to slow down to 0. Actually maybe a little bit farther down the timeline. So we'll go to 30 seconds and we'll change this to 0. Control click again. Now let's see what that looks like. Alright, that looks terrible. So now it's really just a matter of playing with keyframes. So we'll right click on time scale and we'll click animation show track. So here's my animation track with all my keyframes. First of all, I'm going to change these all to linear. You can highlight them all and change them to linear so that they're not easing in and easing out. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. So really I want the slow down to 0% to take a lot longer, so we'll drag this keyframe down a little bit farther. We'll see what that looks like. Okay. I'm just going to tweak these a little bit. Maybe the explosion has to slow down a little bit earlier. See what that looks like. That's too early. Maybe just this keyframe. And like I said, I'm just kind of playing around. This is all, you know, it's not an exact science. It's really just playing around. There we go. See, that looks pretty cool. And we could even have this slow down just a little bit slower. And actually at the end keyframe we could probably have it ease in so that it kind of comes to a slow stop. So let's take a look at that. There you go. See, that looks really cool. Alright, and then I'm not going to show you how to add the camera and all that kind of stuff. I made a quick rig. If you take a look at it, I have a spline kind of circling the cubes, and then on the camera I have a tag called align to spline. And what you do is you just take this spline and you drag it into the spline path. And when you do that, the camera then is stuck along that spline and you can just animate it along the spline, which I did. So if you just change this slider, it kind of animates around it. So I animated that, and then also I added the vibrate tag, which I showed you in a previous tutorial, just kind of add that handheld feel. So if we take a look through our camera, you can see I got kind of a little bit of handheld feel and it rotates around. So that's how I did that. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. I might talk about cameras in another tutorial. But so there you go. That is the first half of this, kind of going over the dynamics and the slowdown and how to do all that. In the next tutorial I'm going to show you how to change the color. When it hits the ground, it changes color. We're going to have to use the Mo shader and the color texture and the random effector and all these different things in order to get random colors all over these cubes. But it's going to be a really cool effect. So yeah, make sure to check back for that one, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye everybody.